Good morning and welcome to Sunday Supplement. On today's show, we'll be asking what next for Pep Guardiola and Manchester City after they were banned from Europe for 2 years. Liverpool continue their relentless march towards a first ever Premier League title with a 1-0 win at Norwich. We look ahead to a huge game at Stamford Bridge tomorrow night, with Chelsea looking to move 9 points clear of Manchester United. And in the final part of the show, with the FA's Heads Up campaign in focus this weekend, we'll look at mental health issues affecting sports journalists. Well, joining us to discuss all of these topics and a few more besides are Martin Samuel, Chief Sports Writer at The Mail, Melissa Reddy is Senior Football Correspondent at The Independent, and Mark Ogden is Senior Football Writer at ESPN. Now, don't forget to tweet the show at Sunday Sup, and the best will appear on the screen over the next 90 minutes or so. Now, before we take our usual look at the back pages, we had some sad news on Sunday Supplement this week with the sudden passing of our former producer, Mike Curry, who worked for Sky Sports for 25 years. Martin, you knew Mike very well, and of course his dad, Steve. What was he like to work with?
Mike was great. Mike came from... It's a different era that Mike started working on that show, because it was completely amateur, basically. It was 4 guys around a table, none of whom were broadcasters, none of whom were professional broadcasters, many of whom had no broadcast experience whatsoever. And Mike's great talent was that he made you feel very, very relaxed. I mean, hugely relaxed. And so you just felt you were having a chat with your mates, basically. And there was no doubt he was talking to people. No doubt he was producing the show as such, but you never got that feeling, and that was really, really important at the time, because you're a professional broadcaster. We had Jimmy Hill, but it wasn't actually... Jimmy was almost a guest on his own show. Brian anchored the show, and again, you know, Brian was a journalist. And so Mike had this way of making you feel relaxed. I think I've been doing it since it was, I think, Friday night. When it was Hold the Back Page, on Friday night, and Kevin Keegan resigned. I was England manager the following day, and one of the things that he cited was the absolute pasting he got on Hold the Back Page the night before the Germany game, when it was known that he was going to pick Gareth Southgate in central midfield, and whoever were the guests that night just went for it. And the following day, when Kevin resigned, that was one of the things that he cited. You've got no faith in me, or you don't think I know anything about football or whatever. I saw Hold the Back Page last night. And Mike, Mike was a producer in that era, and that's what it was like. And it's a bit, I think there's a phrase in filmmaking about trying to wrangle cats, and it was a little, it would have been a little bit like that. And and yet somehow nobody swore, and we all got through it. And he was a great lad. He was a really good lad. He was a really good lad, Mike. And we'll miss him.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you so much for that. And our thoughts very much with Mike's wife, Sam, and little daughter, Millie. So sorry for your loss. Now, moving on to this morning's back pages. Well, I think you can quite possibly guess what is dominating the back of the newspapers. The Sun. Rail step-up Sterling chase, which is as a result, of course, of that 2-year ban as things stand, pending appeal for Manchester City for supposedly breaking FFP regulations. On the back of the Sunday Times is Pep, with one of his many trophies, the death of the dream. Jonathan Northcroft going into detail there, along with David Walsh, on the shaming, as they describe it, of Manchester City. Plenty of inside analysis in loads of the newspapers today, if not all of them. The Telegraph have Pochettino waiting in the wings for banned Manchester City, if that ban does indeed go ahead. Sadio Mane, the super sub, he got half an hour for Liverpool and was the match winner for them at Norwich last night, as bleary-eyed Mark Ogden's going to tell us about shortly. He had a bit of a trek back, bless him. And in the Express, Mane of the moment, with Liverpool beating Norwich. City keeping a close eye on Pochettino also in there. And there's plenty, by the way, in the Observer today. Should you want to be reading a lot about Manchester City, then you can read a lot about it in the Observer. Huge amounts of analysis there. Bonnie Ronay has his say, and plenty of analysis on what it could entail for them. And Jim Holden in the Sunday Express. European ban, a test of character for Guardiola. So were he to stay on? Lots of ifs and buts, by the way, in all of this, which is what we are here to debate. Now, just to clarify, City being banned as things stand from UEFA competition for 2 years, fined almost £25 million as a result, potentially as well facing Premier League points deduction were that to happen after UEFA say that City committed serious breaches of its financial fair play regulations. They found that City overstated their sponsorship revenue between 2012 and 2016. They failed to cooperate with the investigation, so they say. City, on the other hand, deny all wrongdoing. They say it was a prejudicial decision and they certainly will appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. They have another 8 days in which to lodge that appeal, but they certainly will be doing so, they say, at the earliest opportunity. And they say that UEFA have ignored irrefutable evidence and there will be more financial documents to be coming out during the course of that hearing. So, Mark, nice easy one for you on that. The appeal is pending, of course, but what do you think this ban, were it to stand, would mean for the club, for Pep, for the players who all had a meeting about this on Friday?
Well, the back page of the Sun, the picture of the Man City badge fractured into hundreds of little pieces, perfect, because that is exactly where we are right now. It's there are so many elements to this which could happen. It could affect Pep Guardiola's future, the players' future, the finances of the club. There's so many elements which we don't know the answer to right now, because if this goes through as it is, it'll be devastating for Man City, because 2 years without Champions League football will hit the finances of the club. It means, will they be able to pay the wages of the players? Will they be able to pay Pep Guardiola's wages? Will they be able to keep the players and Pep happy at the club in terms of satisfy their ambitions? But it is basically a step on a road, and the road has still got a long way to run, because Man City will fight this tooth and nail, because, they've known this has been coming. They've known that UEFA have been trying to find a way to, I suppose, clip the wings, really. And this ban it's pretty extreme in the sense that a 2-year ban for the Champions League, I think, is unprecedented in terms of a club of this stature. But it leaves so many questions left to be answered, and the papers today clarify that, because we're asking questions about Pep's future, about the players' future, about what happens next. We're even talking about Sheffield United maybe being in the Champions League next season. There's so many strands to it, but right now we're not at a place where we know what's going to happen, because they will appeal, they might get the ban halved, they might get it overturned. There's too many things that need to be resolved before we can find out exactly what will happen now.
Martin, do you have any sympathy with City over this situation?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we meant to be discussing financial fair play in the next part of it. I mean, I can start on it now if you want.
But, I mean, go for it.
But I do have sympathy for City, because City the rules have been put in place to protect a tiny band of elite clubs. You can talk about Leeds or Portsmouth, or this is what it was about. But this is not about Leeds or Portsmouth. If you want to stop Portsmouth happening, you would stop loans from the owner to the club. Everything would have to be a gift if you want to stop Portsmouth happening. Because what happened with Portsmouth was the owner gave them a huge amount of money, and then his financial circumstances changed, and then he wanted it all back. Well, Portsmouth didn't have the money to give him back, because Portsmouth were living beyond their means because of his money. So if you turn everything that's a loan into a gift, it's got to be a gift, you can stop Portsmouth happening. This is not about that. This is about cementing. It's about pressing the pause button on football. And so the only way in, long term, I'm not talking about a miracle. I'm not talking about Leicester. Leicester was a miracle, and then the following season they thought they were going to get relegated. That's how sustainable, as a long-term project. So the only way of getting in was to spend this money. That was otherwise they'd just sit there like Leicester, having Manchester United take their best players. Wayne Rooney at Everton. People talk about clubs can grow organically. How? You tell me how Everton can grow organically if they get a lovely little Wayne Rooney. Yeah, we've got Wayne Rooney. We've got the best young player in English football. And Manchester United come along when he's still a teenager and go, yeah, we'll have him. So how can you go organically? So this was the only way. These big clubs have created this situation, and UEFA have created this situation with their Champions League money. So the only way you can get in is to try to match this arms race, this financial arms race. So that's what Man City did.
So you don't agree with the concept of FFP as it is, but of course everybody has to play by the rules and the regulations as they are, which City insist that they have done, by the way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But UEFA say these are the regulations to try to ensure football is fair.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can be on the wrong side of the rules and the right side of the argument. If you look at, say, Windrush deportations and things like that, you can be on the wrong side of the rules and the right side of the argument. You know, I don't believe... Personally, everyone thinks, you know, if you don't support financial fair play, you're some sort of laissez-faire capitalist that wants everyone to be able to throw money at everything. I don't. What would solve this is proper financial regulation. So instead of giving all the money from the Champions League to 4 or 5 elite clubs, you give it to the majority of it to the league. 75% to the league, let's say, and 25% to the clubs. Now you've got a competitive league. If you did that, that would be a huge start. But they won't do that.
Well, Melissa, in The Observer today, Barney Ronay says, good luck trying to persuade a crop of high-class, mid-career, elite-level players to miss 2 years of top-table football. I think there's top-table football rather than top-table football. They could play that, no problem whatsoever. But, I mean, it will be a challenge if this ban is upheld, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, if it's not overturned altogether. How do you see City going forwards were that to be the case?
It's incredibly difficult because the Champions League revenue in terms of, you know, the broadcasting fees, the gate receipts, just the prestige of the competition itself. So you have the financial elements of them not actually being able to pay the wages that they are able to at the moment. Without that revenue, their profits will drop. I think they'd actually become a loss-making club at that point. There's also reputational damage in terms of the project for Abu Dhabi, which is not very helpful when you want to be associated with beautiful football and, you know, having the best manager in the world and all that. And then, you know, there's all these question marks against you about how you've gone about doing that. So, yeah, in terms of really every element of City as we know them at the moment is in threat. I think, you know, when we talk about FFP and when we talk about City, there can be two different strands of thought. You can think FFP is flawed, and you can also believe that, hang on, you signed up to this, you should actually be playing by the rules as everybody else is. Or, you know, UEFA say it's not just that they've breached the rules, it's that they've misled with information and that they've been antagonistic during the process, not helping the investigation, not being collaborative. Now, City deny all that, but, you know, what UEFA are saying, you can think FFP has its flaws, and you can still think, but you signed up to it. Like all the other clubs, you have to play along with it. We also talk about, you know, City being curtailed in some way. I mean, City have been incredibly successful under FFP. They've, you know, won the domestic treble, they've been the juggernaut, they completely restructured what it takes to win the league in this country, set a new benchmark that, you know, Liverpool are where they are right now because of the standard City set before them. And I think Jurgen Klopp made that point, their football has been exceptional. So City have not been impeded by FFP in becoming successful. That's a misnomer. And FFP is not about competitive balance. That wasn't its aim when it was introduced. And this is quite a sophisticated system that, you know, top accountants worked on, Deloitte worked on, and it was to prevent debt. And when I say you can think it's flawed, the Glazer situation at United, that shouldn't be happening, for example. However, clubs have been recording profits under FFP. So I think, you know, when we talk about it, you can believe that, yeah, it's not the absolute best, but clubs should still be abiding by it because they signed up to it.
I think the players is the issue because, you know, players will just look after themselves at the end of the day. And I remember when Juventus were demoted after the match fixing scandal in Italy, and, you know, Patrick Vieira was one of the first ones to be off, and he's still, you know, basically loathed in Turin because he left Juventus when they were relegated. And players can talk about loyalty and how much they kiss the badge and love the club and what have you. If they feel that their career is being damaged by being at a club that can't offer them what they want, they'll find a way to get out. And, you know, they're all... City's big players, people like Raheem Sterling, Kevin De Bruyne, are all on long-term contracts. So there's no way that City would let these players leave easily. But if they were in a situation where they're not in the Champions League for 2 years, they can't generate the income to pay these players. The players are all mid to late 20s. None have won the Champions League yet. And if they stay at City for the next 2 years, they're not going to win it there. Keeping those players will be hard. We saw it at Leeds, different circumstances, but it's similar in a way that once a club can't offer the players what they signed up for, they'll be off. And their agents will be busy trying to fight. I imagine now there'll be players with agents at Man City who will already investigated where they could go next season if this ban is upheld.
Would you expect those conversations to be had now, bearing in mind that the appeal hasn't even gone in yet? But do you think that's what will have happened? They had that meeting with Ferran Soriano yesterday after they came back on Friday. The players have all been informed. Do you think that's something that's just natural when it comes to top-level football, that agents suddenly, their ears will prick up at this kind of thing?
I mean, whatever the players might be saying, or, you know, they've got agents, the agents will be working on stage two. And if you were a player, you would expect that of your agent. I don't see any problem with that as such. And you can't just say, oh, well, you know, the club said to us, we've got a good chance at the Court of Arbitration. You can't say that because you don't know what's going to happen there. You'd look at the 2 years and cynically you'd say, I wonder if they've given them 2 years because they go to CAS. CAS fines a little bit for City and a little bit for UEFA and splits the difference and they get a 1 year ban. But you can't guarantee that because I think it was Galatasaray went there and got nothing out of CAS. I think UEFA might be CAS's biggest clients. I mean, you know, it's true. I think they are their biggest clients. I mean, I think there's more appeals go to CAS about stuff that UEFA have done than just about anybody else. So you can't guarantee you're going to get the decision.
City did manage to attract players before they reached this situation whereby they won the Premier League, before they became as successful as they have, the likes of Tevez. Company, admittedly, before he became such a big name, but Aguero and David Silva came before they were as enormous as they are. Pep has a great relationship with the owners, doesn't he? I mean, can you see a situation whereby actually they're just going to hang tight and that relationship is good and it won't be that long before they get a result as to knowing what's going to happen? We'd expect before the start of next season.
I think that's the ideal scenario. For all the speculation around Guardiola's future, he's been pretty adamant that he wants to see out his contract. The players, names you've mentioned there, Aguero, he's been so loyal to City. I mean, you know, there's been the option of Real Madrid, Barcelona. He is probably the Premier League's best marksman of the last few years, and yet he's remained. But all these players have had that goal to be the group that wins the Champions League with City, and this tournament is still the outstanding thing that makes them, you know, that super club, top level elite club. You want to win the Champions League, you want to be in that conversation, you want to be spoken about with the likes of Bayern and Madrid and Barcelona, Liverpool. But that, for all the talk of loyalty and for all the time they've spent there and for all the good intentions, if you're prevented from doing your job to the best of your ability, or your career has a ceiling on it, you do think about it and you do consider your options. It's so difficult to speak about this situation because it's all up in the air and we can only sort of speculate and think about what could potentially happen, but there's still so much of this to run.
If this is upheld, and if Liverpool, say, for instance, decide that Kevin De Bruyne is the one player that can make them better, if Liverpool put a bid in for Kevin De Bruyne as Premier League champions, as potential Champions League winners, how did Man City stop Kevin De Bruyne being interested in a move to Liverpool or actually saying I want to go to Liverpool? I know it's hypothetical, but Liverpool now are the best team in England, the best team in Europe, an attractive proposition for any player. If your club isn't in the Champions League for the next 2 seasons, how do you stop him being interested by that?
Well, you can make up your own mind about that, but suffice to say that City remain extremely confident that once all the evidence has been held by an impartial process, which is the key to this, from their point of view, an impartial process, they are very confident that they will prevail. We shall see. Now, coming up in part 2, we look at Liverpool's relentless march to the Premier League title. We'll debate all of that and a little bit more. breaking news, Liverpool have won a Premier League football match. Who'd have thought that? When was the last time we saw that? Well, not for a little while, actually. Mane, the hero yesterday at Carrow Road, right on the Mane. What was that mean?
Money.
Oh, right. Oh, God, yeah. Right,
Some
right
of these
on
puns,
the money.
some of these puns, Jackie. Some of
Do
the
you know
puns
what?
you're looking at it and thinking, and you have to
Right
go
on the
back
money.
about 3 times. It's right on the money.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here, Martin. I'm not having enough sleep to work that one out on sight
I
unseen.
know I'd come in useful one day. But
You're extremely useful. You might need to be useful to find the other part of this particular. Mane, the Centurion as well. So he's now reached 100 goals in English football, with a quarter of them coming for Southampton and the rest for Liverpool. And there's another Mane pun. You see, I
Yes,
get it
yeah,
this
now we've
time.
got it now.
Excellent.
There
Thank
we
you
go.
for that. So Liverpool have now made it quite extraordinary. 103 Premier League points from a possible 105 when you go back to last season, which, if you support them, is a wonderful thing. And even if you don't, that's an extraordinary thing. I mean, you were at Carrow Road yesterday and literally just got here back now, didn't you, after your nice train journey? But very, very hard work for them yesterday. How much of that do you think was down to the awful conditions, the fact they'd had a break and needed to get back into the game, and how much down to Norwich?
A lot of it was down to Norwich, actually. I was really impressed with Norwich last night, and remembering back to the first game of the season at Anfield on the Friday night, where they gave Liverpool a real scare. Lost 4-1 in the end, but still it was a tough night for Liverpool before they got control. Norwich were up for it, and they gave it a better go than most teams were giving it against Liverpool this season. Hit the post second half with when Tete had an effort. But Liverpool just get the job done, and no matter how well they're playing, and they didn't play badly yesterday, they just managed to get the job done. And Klopp made a substitution, brought Mane on, Mane scored the goal, and it was just another performance of champions where they just ground it out. And the statistics are ridiculous, aren't they? I mean, is it 24 wins out of 25 or 25 out of 26?
25 out of 26.
You're losing count now, and consecutive games with goals. That I think they're 6 or 7 behind Arsenal's all-time record, unbeaten record in the top flight. All these records are going to go, and the debate will start about, is this the greatest team ever? And we had that debate 2 years ago about City and Pep, but you can't argue against Liverpool because they're just relentless, and clearly they're going to win the league. I mean, that's a case of when rather than if, but I can't see anyone stopping in the Champions League either, because they're just a perfect machine right now.
I mean, you're a bit of a Liverpool expert, I think it's fair to say, Melissa. I mean, what do you think has been the main key to this extraordinary success?
Mentality, actually. When you speak to other managers and go to other clubs and they talk about Liverpool at the moment, they say performance is excellent because they've got variety, different ways to win games. But when you are so successful, and Julian Nagelsmann brought this up when I went to interview him, when you are so successful, when you're so far ahead of the next best team in the league, and yet you still do everything to win, and you still want to be better, and you still want to find a way, that relentless edge is what he's trying to teach to his players. Look at this club that are so far in the ascendancy, and yet they still keep going. As I referenced, I think Liverpool have played this way because they realised you have to be practically perfect to win the Premier League in the era of Manchester City. The fact that they got 97 points last season and didn't do it, I think that just spurred them on. Like, there's no way we are going to go so close and not do it. We're going to give it absolutely everything and push ourselves over. I think the defence probably doesn't get spoken enough because of all the attacking talent that Liverpool have, but 10 clean sheets in 11, just 1 goal conceded in that sequence when they've played Tottenham, United, Leicester, Sheffield United. It's just staggering, and their brilliance is almost now ordinary and normal, which is odd to say. Alisson makes a sensational save yesterday, and it doesn't even get talked about. We all talk about Mane's goal as the decisive point.
It's easier to make a pun about Mane, apparently.
Yeah.
I find it quite hard.
But yeah, Alisson's just been outstanding. To think that he missed, so many, I think it was like 44 days or 66 days or something of the season, and he's still going to win the Golden Gloves. Virgil van Dijk hasn't even been spoken about in, Player of the Season and in terms of awards, but he's a 9 out of 10 every week. So I think the fact that they've made this excellence so ordinary is remarkable.
It's hard to find anything new to say about Liverpool, isn't it, Martin? But I mean, you've watched all these top teams over so many years now. I mean, how do you think this side compares to some of the greats?
Well, if you look at the numbers, if they end up with the numbers that we think they're going to end up with, I'm not a great believer in this. You've got to win it 3 times on the turn, or you've got to win it, you've got to retain this, and you've got to do. No, you can be wonderful for a year. You can be magnificent for a year. If Nick Drake had never made any album other than Pink Moon, he would still be a genius. If there was never any album other than The Clash's first album, they would still be one of the greatest bands there's ever been. So, you can be great for a season. So if this, they don't have to win it next year. They probably will win it next year, because if you take Man City out of the equation, if what happens to Man City, what we think will happen to Man City, happens to Man City, who's going to catch them? The team that's 35 points behind them at the moment, the team that's 41 points behind them at the moment. I mean, who's going to make that difference up in one summer? So I think this is an exceptional team. I think the recruitment is the greatest recruitment I've ever seen by any club. I really do, because everybody that they have bought just fits in. Everybody that they have bought buys into what Klopp wants to do, and what Klopp wants to do isn't normal. The level of energy that Liverpool expound in every single game isn't. It's not necessarily like playing for another club. They should be dead on their feet. They should be dead on their feet. You see the way they run about, they should be dead on their feet, but they're not. And that means, because they're not all Trent Alexander-Arnold. They haven't all come from the academy. They haven't all been, he's brought these guys in and he's got them to run and run and run and run. Remarkable, absolutely remarkable.
Well, we always say that the true mark of a great team is winning the Champions League, but they've already done that.
Yeah.
The Arsenal's Invincibles
other way round,
didn't do it. Chelsea and Mourinho didn't do it. Man City haven't done it, but Liverpool have done it already. So they've already achieved that mark of greatness before winning the league. And the fact that they haven't won the league for 30 years is an anomaly, but they're going to do it this year. So they've got the Champions League, they've got the league. They'll go close to winning the Champions League again. And no team is out. Only Real Madrid have won back-to-back European Cups in different eras, So this is, again, Liverpool did it in the 80s and 70s. They could do it again now. They are one of the great teams, and you talk about it doesn't have to be prolonged. Well, Arsenal's Invincibles didn't retain it. They didn't win anything since, and they're still one of the greatest teams. But,
yeah, absolutely.
But the thing with Liverpool is they could be the second Invincible. Sorry, Preston fans, but they could be another Invincible. They could break Man City's 100 points record. They could smash every record. So if they do that, it's impossible to say they're not one of the greatest teams we've ever seen, because the statistics just back it up.
They were one of the greatest teams we ever saw last season, and didn't win the league. They're the greatest team ever to win the league. If you look at that points total and you look at what they did, and you look at the run and the records we're talking about now actually start last season, they're one of the greatest teams I've ever seen, and they're the best team ever to win the league. And that can happen. I think when Tiger wins the Masters, when it's the Tiger Slam, I think it's Duval came second and would have won the Masters any year but 4, and Phil Mickelson comes third and would have won the Masters any year but 6. With his scoring, so it can happen. Doesn't make you a bad team if you come second to that Manchester City team.
Melissa, it's going to be really interesting now to see, between now and the end of the season, how much this unbeaten stroke, only dropping points once record is to them when they've got so many big games coming up in terms of team selection.
Yeah, I think the mentality at the moment, and it feels cliched, and you sometimes are bored of the players saying it all the time, just the next game, but that is how they are operating. Every opponent gets the same level of respect, same level of preparation. It obviously is more taxing to balance the latter stages of the Champions League with this relentless push for the title, especially since it's so close. Will there be that release after the title is secured? Like, okay, don't need to go all out anymore, or don't need to chase this records. Although with
Man City away,
yeah, well, with that dressing room, I can't see them easing off. I can't see them thinking, oh, the title's secured now. It doesn't matter if we don't break 100 points, or it doesn't matter if we're not invincible. I think obviously the title is the main thing, but I cannot see them having put this much work in to then ever take the, release sort of the pressure on themselves,
but
or take their foot off.
Melissa, does it not depend on what team he puts out, because at the moment he's got, I think it's the statistic is yesterday was the first time the Champions League winning team has played.
They haven't started all season.
They haven't started all season, but once he's won the league, if they're still in the Champions League, it almost moves to what team he decides to put out, whether it's almost up to him rather than the players, because if he says to Jordan Henderson, mate, you need to take a rest this weekend because, you know, we're playing Barcelona on Wednesday night or whatever, then, you know, it doesn't matter how much Jordan wants to make 100 points or stay unbeaten. He's sitting on the bench and someone else is playing in his place. That's the interesting thing. That is the interesting thing. What Jurgen Klopp decides to do, if they're still in the Champions League, which I think they will be, what he decides to do once the league is won. What teams he decides to pick out.
They've got such talented youngsters as well.
Yeah, but I think that's why he's right to treat that FA Cup replay against Shrewsbury the way he did, to take the players away, because he knows that at the end of the season they're going to need the energies to push on. Certainly two fronts. I think the FA Cup is a competition that he would not happily forego, but if they didn't win that, I don't think he'd shed too many tears. They could win it, but I think it's all about the Premier League and the Champions League, and I think the chance to smash these records, the players will be desperate to do that. They might say they're not, but they'll be desperate to break 100 points, be unbeaten. Because we still talk now about the Invincibles 15, 16 years on, and they will always talk. So they'll want their place in history, but they'll tell us in the mix on, oh, well, you know, it's just the next game. But really, I mean, they'll be desperate to break all these records.
Is it driving you all potty, though, as journalists, the fact they keep coming out with stuff that you know they have to, and you understand why they're doing it? But I mean, how hard is it just to try and get some quotes out of them? It was amusing hearing them on TV after the game yesterday.
Is finding something new to say, because you go to all these games. I mean, I went to Norwich last night thinking, well, there's not much to write, but just in case they draw, not lose, they might, you know, will the story change? But it didn't change. But you have to keep going just in case. It's a just in case situation now, but you write the same things endlessly, time after time.
Well, the good thing is you can just write your match report before you go to a game now, can't you? Then have a spare one just in case they were to drop a couple of points, which would be extraordinary.
Yeah, I think the story now is where it's chasing the summit. There's such a clear path to how you need to do it. When you get there, it's a different challenge to actually stay there. And one of the things Liverpool are determined to do is not sort of abandon the principles that got them to where they are, which is very surgical recruitment, spending on the players, Virgil van Dijk and Alisson, that they believe are absolute transformers, trying to anticipate what they need before they may need it. So Liverpool's squad now are all at a very good age, but in 2 years' time, that, you know, 28 becomes, there's a lot of the squad that's on like around 30. So it's now infusing the other talent through, which we see with the likes of Harvey Elliott, you know, trying to ease him in gradually, but also, you know, they'll look to the market for that. There's a lot of need or want for Liverpool to go and make a massive blockbuster buy, you know, go and spend £150 million on Jadon Sancho or something. But they'd only do that for a transformer or somebody they class as that. And if their current front three stays, which they expect them to this summer, then there is no need to go and spend that money. That is a departure from what they've done to get them to where they are. So it'll be interesting to see if they actually stick to that policy, because there is so much pressure to stay at the summit when you get there.
Do you think they'll go big on someone like a Sancho? Do you see that happening?
I mean,
or who will?
I think, look, if Mbappe became available, or as I said, De Bruyne and that sort of player, of course they would go for that player. I think they should sign somebody. They shouldn't just stand still and think, well, you know, we're the best team, we'll keep it as it is. But we're just saying they're not reinventing the wheel by planning ahead and being strategic, because, you know, it was United went to Fergie for 3 or 4 different teams. City did it at the start of their dominance. It's what good teams do, and it's when that breaks down that the problems start, as we saw at United, maybe we've seen at City, because they need a left back, they need a right back, they need to replace Fernandinho, a lot of things happening at once. Liverpool are just doing what all the great teams in the past have done, just being smart and planned 2 or 3 years ahead, but it doesn't always stay that way. You know, if they make a bad signing, that could change everything. I'm not saying they will, and they haven't been lucky. They've been very kind of smart in the transfer market, but it only takes one bad signing to change the whole dynamic, and then they're playing catch up, you know. And if they make the wrong buy, if they get the wrong centre half to play alongside Van Dijk, or they bring in a Sancho, or they go for Mbappe and get him, and it changes everything. That could be, you know, when United signed Varane, It was a great sign. It was just the icing on the cake and the cherry on the icing. And it wasn't a disaster. Fergie said it wasn't a disaster, but it didn't really work out.
Well, it wasn't good.
So you can try too hard to get that perfect sign to make it all even better. So it just depends on your recruitment being as good as it always has been, but it never lasts forever, no matter who you are.
De Bruyne is interesting because if you were working on a team of the season right now, I said this to someone the other day, you just go 1 to 11 Liverpool. But no one else will get in from any other club. 1 to 11 Liverpool. And someone said, Kevin De Bruyne. You go, okay then. But which Liverpool midfield player do you actually say, oh, you're the worst player in this Liverpool midfield? You know, it comes as such a unit, that Liverpool midfield. But it is a valid point. Kevin De Bruyne is the one player that you might go, OK, we'll have 10 red shirts and we're going to have 1 blue shirt, and that's Kevin De Bruyne. So he is the one thing that they haven't actually got. It's whether Klopp thinks they need that player or not, or whether they can.
If he was a Liverpool midfielder, he'd be the first name on the team sheet every week, Kevin De Bruyne.
Yeah.
And I think the others would fit in around. He's
in place of?
Well, they'd just fit around him. But for me...
Yeah, Kevin De Bruyne.
You're not taking one out now. We're playing with 12 players right now.
He's the closest thing to Steven Gerrard that I've seen, and, you know, Liverpool have never replaced Steven Gerrard like for like. You know, Henderson's got the armband and Fabinho's coming and Milner's coming, but come on, it's Kevin De Bruyne.
De Bruyne walks into every midfield in world football, I think. He's absolutely masterful to watch, and I often wonder who's the best player in the Premier League, and I think he's definitely top 3 and has been for a while. Could he split
the vote for the Player of the Year like Ginola did in 1999?
Very final question. This is really mean, Melissa. I'm going to put you on the spot. If you have one vote for one Liverpool player to be their Player of the Season, who would you vote for?
That is...
You can think about it in the break if you want.
That's very difficult, but I think Virgil van Dijk.
OK. You could pick whoever you like out of any of them, couldn't you? Coming up in part 3, we're going to be looking ahead to Chelsea's match against Manchester United, which is on Monday Night Football. See you in a second. Hi, and welcome back to Sunday Supplement. On the back pages today, as you might expect, rather a lot on Manchester City and their FFP situation. Sunday Mirror going for a more sympathetic approach. This is not Armageddon. City convinced that evidence will put them in the clear and overturn the ban. Sadio Mane there copped just 5 wins from title glory. I wonder what would happen if they didn't win another game between now and the end of the season.
If they didn't win another game, they lost every game, and Manchester United won every game, they would still finish above Manchester United.
Ouch.
That's
Ouch.
That's true.
Ouch, but true. Thanks for that, Martin. On the back of the Sunday People, Villa to bank on Grealish. They'll break the bank to keep Jack Grealish at the club, says Neil Moxley, and betrayed. Luke Shaw says Manchester United stars have let down Ole Gunnar Solskjaer this season. We were saying it'd be a bit more fun if a player were to actually say, no, it's all the manager's fault, not the players, but he's not said that.
For that.
And Paul Pogba, super agent Mino Raiola, has infuriated Man United by claiming he's had talks to take Paul Pogba back to Juventus. Raiola saying that he does talk to Juventus big bosses. Now, on this, Chelsea, when they play Manchester United tomorrow night, will go 9 points clear of Manchester United if they are to win. How do we see this game going, Mark?
Well, United have beaten Chelsea opening day of the season. They won there in the Carabao Cup, but this is a much bigger game than the Carabao Cup, and I think the fact that Chelsea can go 9 points clear, that puts United out of the top 4 race for me if they do that. And I think United are struggling, aren't they? They lack a striker, they lack goals. They've got a Gala who might make an appearance tomorrow night. I just think that United desperately need to win this game, but I don't think they will. And I think then if they fall 9 points behind Chelsea in the race for the top 4, then we're back to 12 months ago. The season petering out under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Questions being asked about his future, the future of the players. I mean, what Luke Shaw says there about the players letting Solskjaer down, talk about stating the obvious. But it gets back to Solskjaer not being qualified or good enough to get the best out of those players. I think he's probably done a decent job getting United to where they are right now, considering the players that he let go last summer and the lack of investment in key areas. But because it is the worst United team I've seen for 30 years. But still, it's Man United and they shouldn't be 9 points adrift to the top 4 in the middle of February. So it's going to be another interesting summer.
Yeah, Man United 9th in the table, just a point ahead of Burnley, who won yesterday. Your thoughts on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and United?
They seem as if they want to stick with him, as if they regard this as some sort of long-term process that they're going through. He didn't inherit a good situation. Let's be honest about it. He didn't inherit a good situation. The buy-in, the recruitment aspect of it has been rather haphazard. Now, for once in the last few years, they now look as if they've got some sort of coherent policy built around doing what United have always done, which is nick everybody else's good players. You know, Harry Maguire and Wan-Bissaka and James and possibly Maddison and Jack Grealish and stuff, as if they're sort of going to try to build again, rebuild again around this core of young British Premier League players. So that's at least a plan. But it's a long-term plan. I mean, that doesn't come right, you know, in 2 minutes in the summer. And then it's whether that they keep the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer thing is a big problem for him, because you know he's a legend. He's an Old Trafford legend, and to, you know, Mark will know better than me what the fans think. You know, would the fans stomach them sacking Ole Gunnar Solskjaer?
Yeah, they would. And I think it goes back to when Liverpool got rid of Dalglish in, was it 2012? I think the point came where even the fans were thinking he's a legend, but he's not the man for the club. And I think with Solskjaer, yes, he's a legend, but the fans aren't stupid. They realise that this is a guy that got Cardiff relegated and in his first spell in the Premier League and has spent the rest of his career managing in Norway. It's not good enough for a club of Man United stature. The United should be hiring the best around and then backing the manager and letting him get on with it. But it goes. We have this conversation all the time. It's all about the structure. United's structure is just wrong. They've got, you know, Ed Woodward's been there for 7 years now. I think we're approaching. I think this week is the 7th anniversary of David Gill saying he's standing down. So 7 years on, the structure hasn't really changed, and we keep hearing about, well, we're going to invest in scouts and we're going to, you know, we're going to have a reboot. We've been hearing the same thing for 7 years. Oh, we're going to have more scouts. We're going to change the system. We're going to change the way we do things. Why is it taking 7 years? It's the longest transitional period of any big club I can ever remember. Can you imagine Real Madrid or Barcelona, you know, having a 7-year transitional period?
We're only that much into the Arsenal one yet. You look at the Arsenal one, I mean, you know, bottom half of the table at the moment.
But Arsenal, for me, they're not a club in the same stature as Man United.
No, yeah.
Sorry, Arsenal fans, but they're not. You know, they haven't had the same prolonged success. They're not the same global stature club as United are. And United keep talking about how financially they earn more than anybody else. Well, that's changing. You know, was it 18 months ago now they said they're going to get director of football, technical director? Well, that's been kicked into the long grass, very long grass. Don't know what it is anymore. And, you know, Ed Woodward's still the guy that signs off the transfers with Matt Judge, the contractual negotiator, and this panel of experts. But, you know, they went into January looking for a midfielder and a striker. They spent a month basically haggling over Bruno Fernandes and the fee, and still ended up paying pretty much what they didn't want to pay at the start. And signed a guy who's spent the last 2 years playing in China and, you know, hasn't been able to train with them for the last 2 weeks because of the coronavirus issue. So how did Man United end up signing Odion Ighalo if they had this great network of scouts? And, you know, there were times in the summer that they had 804 right-backs in the database when they signed Wan-Bissaka, but they narrowed it down to Wan-Bissaka. Well, what database stores about Odion Ighalo?
I think there's a difference between doing what you perceive to be the right thing and the actual right thing. So the whole, we really like Bruno Fernandes, but we're not paying over the odds for him. That's the perception that this is the right thing to do, show you're strong. But you end up wasting a month where the player could have come in, made a difference, possibly taken you closer to the top, because they've been lacking creativity, sorely needing it. He's that injection of creativity, only to then end up paying the same package deal that was asked of them, but they've wasted that time. Why? They wanted to be seen to be doing the right thing. Same with this long-term planning and Solskjaer. They want to be seen to be patient, to be following this long-term template because it looks like the right thing to do. But is it the right manager? Where is the evidence that he's put in place a successful long-term template anywhere? When they brought him in as caretaker charge. he went on a very good run. The emotion and all that, the clamour from former players and stuff to get him the position on a permanent basis is what actually got him the position, not his attributes or his CV or his, or the evidence that he could, for the next 5 years, turn them into the elite force that they should be.
Sir Alex Ferguson was keen though, wasn't he?
Yeah, but still, that's working in, not working in reality of the situation. It's being
it was a sticky plaster.
Nostalgic and emotive, and I don't think big clubs should be operating like that.
But that's what they are. That's what United are. They've become this nostalgic club. You only got to listen to the music on the tannoy. It's where music died in 1991. Old Trafford now, it's still like the Stone Roses. You're looking at it going, come on, it's a nice 30, nearly 30. Well, who should they be playing?
You need to tell us this, Mark.
Maybe the Cortinas and Blossoms, maybe. But that's
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Good knowledge.
Yeah, Jimothy. I quite like Jimothy as well. But anyway, they're
trying to copy Liverpool, and they'll admit that Liverpool's model is what they want to go down, which is all well and good. But Jurgen Klopp had gone to Liverpool as a double winner with Dortmund. They won the Bundesliga twice, and obviously learnt the ropes at Mainz. They've got Michael Edwards, who's running the show at Liverpool. United have brought in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who's never won the Bundesliga or anything remotely approaching that, hasn't taken a team to a Champions League final like Jurgen Klopp did at Dortmund. So they're trying to emulate Liverpool, but doing it on the cheap.
But it's a different way of doing it, isn't it? Because they think that he can bring through young players. He signed some good players, Daniel James, Aaron Wan-Bissaka as well. I mean, he surely needs a couple of transfer windows to be able to really stamp his authority on it.
But this thing about giving somebody time to make more mistakes is, he's not made mistakes in the transfer market, but give somebody time. But if he's not the right man for the job, the more time you give them, the more time you go backwards.
But if they feel it is the right man, then they feel they need to give him more time.
Maybe
Talking
they do,
about time, we need to go on to Chelsea, because that's who they're playing. They could cut the gap to 3 points, could be 9 points if they were to lose. Really interesting situation with Chelsea is that Frank Lampard and Kepa, the goalkeeper, world record signing for a goalkeeper. He's been described by various pundits as just looking a little bit weak. It's difficult for Frank Lampard, isn't it? Because he has to publicly back his goalkeeper. What's your view on whether he's going to stick with him and what the situation is there?
I think it's quite difficult because obviously the outlay they've not signed him, they've signed him to be their goalkeeper over a long period of time. So it's like with David De Gea, and I don't like to compare every situation to David De Gea because he's, been an exceptional goalkeeper, but you do go through sticky patches. I think the problem for Chelsea is their overall protection hasn't actually been good in their defensive phases. That puts extra pressure on Kepa, but his shot save percentage is so low. They concede so much over the expected goals that they should. The chances they give up, the quality of the chances they give up shouldn't actually be leading to goals. And they are, which is a problem. He said Kepa's reacted very well to being dropped, and he expects to see that reaction in between the sticks. I don't like to see young players, and I mean he is young in goalkeeping age. I don't like to see them come under such criticism. It's not a healthy environment. So I do hope that he finds his feet again.
In terms of Frank Lampard and the media reaction towards him has been very, very positive, generally speaking, hasn't it? It's probably the least pressure on any Chelsea manager in recent years, isn't it? I mean, is that because he's so respected as a player and because he's moving in the right direction, and the way he talks and his actions so far have all been pretty positive? Yeah,
and I think his circumstances meant that you can't look at that. You can't look at the Chelsea job that Frank has inherited and compare it to previous Chelsea managers. They had the transfer ban, and he, the clear instruction was to use the young players as well, or certainly there was a green light to use the young players. And so for that reason, you just think, well, the guy's got a free hit for a year, and then next season, I would have thought he's under the same pressure that Chelsea managers have always been under, and which is you win the league or you win the Champions League, and or that's it, and that's how Roman's always done it. And the only guy that has managed to survive, having not done one of those two things, I think, is Jose.
Yeah. OK, thank you for now, Martin. When we come back after the break, we'll focus on the race for the Premier League and the Champions League places, and also the Championship yesterday. Absolutely fascinating the last couple of weeks. What a division that is. We'll look at that when we come back. Welcome back to Sunday Supplement. We're fascinated by this part because Melissa's just chosen to open an orange in the ad break, which is, I think, unprecedented on this show. And we are fascinated to see how she gets on with the squirting segments. Now, Leeds United, they've won a game of football again, and things are back on track in terms of the Championship. They are in second place, 4 points behind West Brom, who drew with Nottingham Forest yesterday. Luke Ayling there with the winner against Bristol City at Elland Road. So Bristol City just outside the playoff places in 7th place. Only 10 points separate them and West Brom, who are at the top. I absolutely love the Championship. It is just a wonderful division in terms of the tightness of the teams. Your thoughts on the race for the Premier League this season?
Well, I mean, only that it's always compelling, the Championship, because there's so much at stake, and it's utterly random. Because if you look at the Premier League, how much you spend on players, and certainly your wage bill, pretty much dictates where you're going to be in the league. Everyone in the Premier League is invariably within, I think it's 2 places of their wage bill. If you wrote out the table, 1 to 20, who's paying the most, who's paying the least, that's pretty much the Premier League table. The Championship doesn't work like that. You've got clubs like Stoke and down the bottom. When Blackpool came up a number of years ago, they had, I think they were in the bottom 5 or 6 payers in the Championship. It doesn't respond to that sort of consistency. It's not like a branch of accountancy. And that's what makes it fascinating. And you look at Leeds, you look at Sheffield Wednesday and club. You've got these huge clubs that could do something, that could come up, the way that Aston Villa did last season. And it's arguably the best competition in English football.
It's all about clubs being well managed as well, because that point you make about the budget. Burnley, Huddersfield have both come up on low budget. Sheffield United came within 2 years of being in League One. It's all about having a good manager who knows the club.
Absolutely.
And the bigger clubs that keep failing are the ones that keep changing managers, keep throwing money at players. And Leeds seem to have finally got it right with Bielsa, in the sense that prior to him arriving, they were always kind of failing to get into the playoffs. He's now made them a top 6 team, but I was listening to Alex Bruce on the radio yesterday, going to Norwich to Steve Bruce's son, ex-million clubs, and he was making the point that 46 teams in the Championship, you have to kind of adapt your management style or coaching style for the league you're in. And his fear with Leeds and Bielsa was that Bielsa trains his players so hard and is so demanding of their time that they genuinely tail away at the end of the season. And that happened last year, and there have been warning signs again that it might happen this time. And they won yesterday, and it was a great weekend for Leeds because everyone around them dropped points. But you do worry about how their energy levels will last towards the end of the season. Because I saw that game at Arsenal when they were fantastic the first half of that cup. They were brilliant. They were the best team. Yeah, they should have scored 3 or 4, but they didn't put their Arsenal away and lost the game. And you just worry that Leeds are such an attractive team to watch that it might be, the problem could be the lack of energy. And I think nobody wants to give anyone a free pass, but Leeds have been out of the top flight for too long now. And even though Leeds are a club that generate a lot of negative opinions from rival fans, the Premier League could be a much better product with Leeds in it.
Looking at it, I mean, I was at Charlton-Blackburn yesterday. No one's really talking about Blackburn in terms of the Premier League next season whatsoever, former winners, of course. And they finished the day 3 points off the playoff places, sort of from nowhere, bearing in mind that Preston and Bristol City lost above them. And in terms of the finances for the Premier League, it is fascinating to see how some of them gamble, some of them do it judiciously and very carefully. I mean, what's your take on where things stand?
I saw a good tweet that said, the clubs that leave the Championship, that actually gain promotion to the Premier League, the celebrations aren't actually because they've reached the Premier League, it's because they've escaped the madness of the Champions League, where, as Martin says, it's so random and it's so on edge. It's incredible and exciting. I'd, like Mark, would like to see Leeds.
Well, Leeds United are second. They are 4 points behind West Brom at the top. Would you expect them to go up, West Brom, as things stand?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've got a decent cushion. I think is there a gap of maybe 6-7 points to third.
7 points clear of Fulham, who
Yeah.
bizarrely lost
Strange
3-0 home to
loss.
Barnsley
Yeah.
yesterday.
Incredible, yeah.
Extraordinary.
I think West Brom will go up, but the race for second is anybody's guess. I mean, Preston in sixth have, again, talk about good management on a lower budget. Preston have always been there or thereabouts, and Alex Neil's taken Norwich up in the past. So, Preston, although they didn't have a great result yesterday, they've been there all season, and they could be the team that, again, goes up because of good management rather than big investment.
Yeah, moving on to today's Super Sunday matches. Arsenal playing Newcastle this afternoon. I was quite intrigued hearing Craig Hope on the show a couple of weeks ago when I wasn't here, and he was really talking about how lucky Newcastle United have been this season. But then some people think that Mikel Arteta's quite lucky, bearing in mind he hasn't had a huge amount of criticism for his sort of lack of wins in charge so far. What's your take on that?
Well, with Arteta, they're a mid-table team, aren't they, Arsenal? I mean, and they've drifted, and they have remained a mid-table team, and they've changed their manager, but that's where they are. I think the last time I was on here was 6 weeks ago or something like that, and John Cross was on there, and he was talking about how strong their squad was, and I can't see that. I can't see that. I think their squad is exactly the squad of a mid-table club. I don't fancy the defence much. The midfield has got great weakness, and they've got some good forwards. And that's what's kept them where they are. If you took the forwards out of it,
that's always been the case for the last 10-12 years, hasn't it? With Arsenal, great forwards, rubbish defenders, basically.
Surely it's the first thing you need to address, isn't it? Sorting out the defence. I know it's easier said than done.
Yeah, but that's the whole point. One, you've got to have somebody who wants to spend some money, which... and number two, you've got to have the time to do it. And when he came in, you can't address that. You can't address a problem of the type that Arsenal have. You can't address that in one transfer window, certainly not a January transfer window. So he needs the summer. But he also needs a board of directors that are going to say, right, we realise what this club needs, and it needs a complete rebuild.
Both sides in the bottom half of the table, level on points, 31 points from 25, and that suggests in itself that there's a huge amount of work ahead for Arteta. What do you think he needs to address first?
Like we've spoke about it, the balance in the squad is all wrong, and actually from early signs you can see him trying to get it right, trying to tighten their transitions. I've seen Arsenal do a lot more work off the ball than in recent seasons. We were talking about Solskjaer earlier, and whenever you bring up Solskjaer, you always get accused of, well, why are you not talking about Frank Lampard, and why are you not talking about Arteta? And oftentimes, if you can see sort of what a manager, what his intentions are, and how his intentions are relating to what's happening on the pitch, you can see the process, so you do give them a chance to actually go with the process. And I think that's the case for Arteta. Having watched a few Arsenal games, I can see the elements he's corrected, while also still seeing how much of a massive job it is to sort of make them as competitive as the clubs they want to be in the same conversation as. I think there's, in terms of recruitment, in terms of actually bringing more experience and professionalism into the dressing room, changing the culture around Arsenal, because it's not just okay to be entertaining. You have to have an actual purpose as well. So there is a lot of work for him, and he will probably be judged, harshly going forward. But I think early stages, there have been positive signs.
And just finally, a word on Tottenham today away at Aston Villa. If Tottenham win, then they go 5th above Sheffield United, which, as things stand, could well be a Champions League place for next season. Thoughts on that? Yeah,
it's kind of hard to get a grip on Tottenham at the moment, because obviously Harry Kane's missing and Mourinho's gone there, and it seems to have taken a bit of the joy out of Tottenham in the way they play, but he's brought a bit more pragmatism. And that's what Mourinho does. I'm not quite sure how that one's going to play out. It doesn't. Nothing that I've seen in the first 2 or 3 months so far suggests that Tottenham are going to be challenging for the top 4 again next season, or winning something. It just feels like, they're just biding time really until the next guy comes in and plays like Tottenham again.
Really?
Yeah.
Not fun to watch?
I haven't found that. I think they've been all right. I think they'll come. I think they'll be the beneficiaries of Manchester City not being in the Champions League next season. If that's what happens, I think Tottenham get that place, that 5th place. I'd love to see Sheffield United get it just for the newness of it, and because they're not part of that elite cabal. But I think Tottenham will be the beneficiaries of that. I think now that he's got that incentive, now that there is this real chance that you can come 5th, and you know, I think Jose Mourinho is a very good guy to get you that. the way he did it with the Europa League when they won the Europa League, when he just left the league alone and went, right, we win the Europa League, we're getting to the Champions League. I think he'll do that with Tottenham.
He knows what he's doing. Thank you for now. Now, we'll be heading into our final part of the show next after the break with the FA's Heads Up campaign in focus this weekend. We'll be looking at mental health issues affecting sports journalists. Join us in a second. Welcome back. Now, the FA's mental health awareness campaign Heads Up continues to be in the spotlight this weekend. Aston Villa's John McGinn interviews the FA President, Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, on Super Sunday this afternoon ahead of the Premier League games. And with that in mind, we're going to be using this part now to talk about mental health in sports journalism. We always talk about issues involving sports journalism in this part, but this is something that doesn't really get talked about very much, presumably because sports journalists, Martin, don't want to be talking about themselves and writing about themselves when people will say, oh, Diddums, woe is me, it's not quite going down pits, you're travelling around the world.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting to football matches for nothing, so no one wants to hear about the other side of it anyway.
But mental health issues can affect everybody, and that's the point, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that is. But I mean, with sports journalism, it's just, you know, no one wants to hear that, you know. I think we were talking before the programme began, and cricket writing came up, the cricket writers. Those guys are 3-4 months away from home at a time and stuff like that. And it's not much different to the players in terms of the times away from home. And in fact, some of the writers are away from home more than the players, because you've got players now that work in one format, so they play the test matches, it goes to the one-day format, they come home. You've got guys who are cricket writers and they go, right, it's the test matches and then it's the one-day series and then it's the T20 series, and they do the lot. So yeah, that side of it is quite stressful for people.
The combination of factors as well, Mark, that are involved with perhaps adding up to some of the issues that we know that some sports journalists do have, as you have in cross-section of society, but particularly, you know, the pack mentality, and that the people that you're on your travels with, yes, they're your allies, but also they're your rivals as well. Just tell us a little bit about that and the dynamic there.
Yeah, I mean, you do tend to travel together in a group, because if you're doing England, for instance, at a major tournament, or you're covering a club in the Champions League, you travel with the same people all the time, and they are colleagues and the rivals, because obviously it's a competitive industry, so if somebody gets a story that you haven't got, then there's an element of edge to that. So on one hand, you have to be aware that you're travelling with your rivals, you have to be aware what they're doing, but also you have to get on with them. You know, there's nothing worse than travelling with people that you don't get on with, because if you're away for any period of time, you can't just stay in your hotel room, you need to kind of socialise with people, and you know, you become good friends. There's a lot of people in this job that you become good friends with. But you know, I have to kind of admit that you do feel a bit of a fraud talking like this sometimes, because, you know, my brother, for instance, he's a fireman, so for me that's a proper job, with proper stresses and proper strains and proper kind of things that, you know, I go to football matches and I get back late sometimes from a game, and, you know, you get an early flight and think, oh, God, I'm flying at 6 o'clock. It's not, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Could be coal mine.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like I said, you know, my brother puts out fires, goes to car traffic accidents, there's serious stuff. But any job is a job, and it can be challenging, especially when you're away for quite a long time. And if you're away in a different time zone, for instance, you know, you talk about the cricket guys. If you're in Australia for a period of time, or 2 weeks, you're not only away from your family and you're in a different part of the world, the time zone makes it impossible to contact people. So you're isolated and you're out of the loop. But then people say, well, you're staying in a 5-star hotel and you're eating at the best restaurants and this, that, and the other. That's not always the case. It's not really the case, to be honest. But you know, it is a job with stresses and strains, and we all know people around this table that are struggling with the job at times, because it's very demanding. There's a demanding element from the employers. there's a lot of low-budget travel and early flights and bad hotels, and you know, it's not glamorous to stay in a budget hotel for 2 or 3 weeks when the view outside is an air conditioning unit or something like that. But like Martin says, we're getting into football matches for free and we're getting paid to do it, so it only goes so far. You wouldn't actually seek sympathy for it.
Yeah. It's not a case of seeking sympathy, is it? What's your take on it?
I think we're all fortunate to do the jobs we do. I don't think any of us would debate that. And it's passion, and you get to watch football and you get to analyse football and you get to speak to managers and players, and it is a very cool thing to be part of if you've got a lot of time for the game and you're so passionate about it. But it's still a job. It's a job with horrible hours. There is actually no set hours. It's not a 9 to 5. It's unpredictable. It's a job where you're away a lot. You have to sacrifice a lot. So you sacrifice a lot of your life in terms of your social life with your friends, or whether you're in a relationship, you're not seeing the other person or stuff like that. There's enormous pressure to produce all the time. There's deadlines, there's competition, like we've said, but also there's a toxicity that you're exposed to with social media, where we're reporters, we're reporting, we get information, we put out that information, or you speak to people who are very well informed, who you then get an opinion about a subject and you put forward that opinion that's been well researched, you've spoken to all the right people, and you put it out and it just gets hammered, or you receive a lot of abuse, and I think tribalism plays a massive part in it. The fact that people think they're anonymous and can just say anything to you also plays a part in it. So all these sort of things add up, and I often see when players come out and say they've got issues, people are like, oh, well, you've got all that money, and so you should be able to deal with it. Oh, with journalists it would be, oh, well, you get to go and watch the games for free, you get to travel the world, you should be okay with it. Or you've got that many followers, you should expect it, you should just deal with it. And I don't think anybody in any field should just have to have thick skin and deal with it, deal with abuse, deal with not being mentally okay and feeling like they can't speak about it. I don't think it's healthy in any sort of walk of life.
I mean, social media is a big thing, and we'll turn our phones on this morning after this, and Sunday Supplement there'll be a lot of responses, and a lot of it will be quite hostile. Now, I'm quite blasé about all that, and it doesn't really bother me. I'm quite lucky to be like that, and I know a lot of people aren't. I can't imagine what you get sometimes. You're not on social media, are you? And
do you look? You don't even look. You don't even look at Twitter.
Could not care less.
You're not on every morning going MARTIN space.
Could not care less. Could not care less.
But in terms of this serious issue, I was talking to a couple of your former colleagues yesterday who've been around the block for a long, long time. They were very open about a lot of issues that they'd heard about, experienced either themselves, from their colleagues. It sounds like it's not something you've experienced yourself, which is fantastic. But in terms of those long hours, the travelling, being away from home for weeks on end, away from families,
but you
and
know
how it
that
can breed those mental health issues if you are prone to
that. No, that's true. Look, I'm not being dismissive of it, but I just don't see it as any different to any other jobs, really, in terms of every job has got it. So when people go, oh, this is, that must be great to be a sports journalist, you go, yeah, it is. It is fantastic, but in the end, it is a job. So it's got its own, it's got its own drags, same as any other job. But then again, I don't see the mental health issue as any different to any other job either. Every job has got a drag, and yeah, I totally agree with that.
To get to anyone in any profession, and it's difficult in banking, in the police. You have to be a certain character to deal with it.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you all for your contribution. By the way, the Football Writers Association has been working in partnership with the FA and this campaign, and they're producing a tailored approach and a mental health guide for journalists on this front. Now, thank you to everyone here. Don't forget, you can catch up with the football today on Sky Sports Premier League, starting at 1 o'clock. Aston Villa against Tottenham, then Arsenal against Newcastle, both locked together in Premier League mid-table as things stand. Then the big one, Chelsea, Manchester United tomorrow night. starting at 7 o'clock. You can watch all the goals and highlights in-game in your Sky Sports app. Thank you so much for watching. You can catch up on the show on the podcast and on demand. We'll be back next week at the usual time, 10 o'clock in the morning. See you then. Bye for now.
Sky Sports. Feel it all.